Valère Germain has sensationally quit Macarthur on the eve of the club's run towards the A-League finals. The Frenchman cited officiating standards in Australia as one of the reasons for asking for a release. That's the news as we saw it on Monday afternoon. Quits the A-League. Wow. Germain hasn't had the friendliest of times on the field, that's for sure. Countless blow-ups, post-match fisticuffs, red cards and complaining. To cite the referee's standard of behaviour as a reason for your departure feels a lot like the pot calling the cowbell black. Not to mention the timing of it all, departing just as the club that you were the captain of is competing to qualify for just their third final series in their history. Anyway, he's gone now. Someone else will have to step up to fill the goal-scoring void as the Bulls slip out of the six. Auckland break away as the Jets pull off back-to-back scalps. Western miss their chance as a tantalising Melbourne derby awaits on this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. My name is Lachlan Avil and joining me tonight is Christian Montegan. Christian, a bit of a bombshell on a Monday afternoon for us.
Definitely wasn't expecting that. That's for sure. We usually get these bombshells just before we record the second podcast during the week, but we've received this bombshell for the first step. So yeah, a lot to sort of unpack because like I said, a real shock. Who honestly expected that?
Jacob Stevens, hello to you. My initial reaction when reading this, not as a Macarthur fan or having any affiliation with the club at all, but just so disappointed that someone who, number one, has paid his salary for, a year and a half now, something like that, and has brought him in, allowed him to be captain of a new and growing football club. For him to leave them in this situation just like that, I was extremely disappointed for them.
It's pathetic, to be honest. Like, you're a professional footballer. Just get on with it. It's part of the game. Refereeing is going to be inconsistent ears everywhere in the world. I love that he thinks that if he just goes somewhere else, it's going to be perfect and fine, and there's going to be no.
I don't think he does genuinely think that. To bring it into reality a little bit.
Yeah, but it's that makes his argument that part of it is about the officiating even more pathetic. Is that he's got to realise that it's a reality of the game, and yet he's still using it as part of his excuse, allegedly. Yeah, I just think it's a really bad look move. And everything that club's going through at the moment with players, both on and off the pitch, it's it just adds to the story that there seems to be something going on at that club that's not quite right, because you can say anything you want about any of the other clubs, but this isn't happening consistently, and it does seem to be at Macarthur. So perhaps there's a little bit more going on than we're privy to.
Yeah, so George Clark dropped this news from AAP on Monday afternoon. Germain is reportedly on his way to Japan, I guess just like Tolga Arslan did really, in terms of quality visa signings in the A-League, moving away to Japan after he mutually terminated his contract. I guess, Christian, it just feels like he's kind of dumped and left, right? Like, the refereeing thing is allegedly one of the reasons. He's got a contract offer. He's decided, I've had enough of the A-League. He's obviously serving, he was partway through a 2-game suspension for the gesture he made towards one of the assistant referees a couple of weeks ago. And he's half through that. He made a comment on social media, on Instagram, on Sunday night during the game, complaining about the referees again. It does feel very petulant. I don't know whether he genuinely expects, the standard of officiating in Japan to be significantly better than that of Australia. But regardless of what you think of that angle, to leave at this moment in time just is very unfortunate.
If he generally feels that way, if he's got all these concerns and he really isn't happy at the club, and okay, fair enough, but you don't leave at this point in the season, especially when you're supposed to be a leader, right? You're wearing the captain's armband. You're supposed to set an example. What sort of example are you setting by leaving a few rounds before a potential finals berth? And now that he's left, it puts finals, a very major doubt for them because of the players that left in January and that hole now in that front third with just another player going. It's going to be very difficult. And I saw part of Mile Stijovski's statement. I'm just thinking to myself, he'd be absolutely fuming right now because that's the last thing he needs and he wants on his plate. So, for Germain, we always know he's been a hothead, right? He's got into a few scuffles. He got sent off in the semi-finals of the Australia Cup against South Melbourne, missed the Australia Cup final because of ill discipline. So it's not like it's anything new. And I just think is it entirely the ref's fault, or does he have some responsibility to play as well? Because from
Absolutely.
memory, that was a pretty reckless challenge that he made against South Melbourne. I believe it was only like minutes to go. So for such an experienced head like that to make these rash decisions when you're supposed to be a leader, it's just pathetic, in all honesty. And to leave, like I said, at this point of the season, just leaving your club hanging, just putting them under the bus, it's disappointing for the fans as well, who, when they come to pay their tickets, they want to see a class player like Germain step out on the field, like they did for De Villa last season, right? So to have these quality players leave for different reasons, obviously, it's very disappointing.
I guess, Jacob, one part of kind of coming and playing football in Australia, and especially football because it's such a globalised sport, that you can get away with things like this a little bit to an extent if you go far enough away. You know what I mean? Like Japan is still in Asia, but still in terms of culture and language and all that, it's very far away. So in other sporting codes we see around the country, you know, the AFL, the NRL, if you've got closed leagues, everyone knows everyone, those kind of reputational things stay around. But in football, to a certain extent, especially in Australia, you can kind of run away from it a little.
And, you know, by proxy, a lot of people run to Australia to escape things perhaps in other places, you know, in football. One that comes to mind is Ken Ilso, famously for Adelaide, came to Adelaide, played all of 2 games before he was busted for drugs. So it's like, it's, you know, it does feel like it goes both ways in that regard. And yeah, it is perhaps just a product of being so isolated in world football, just in general as well, right? Like you mentioned there, Lockie, language barriers is a huge thing, because the only country near us that speaks English is of course New Zealand, and well, their professional clubs both play in the A-League, so it's not like you can jump over there and get away from it. You have to go somewhere that speaks a completely different language, completely different culture, like you mentioned. So yeah, you know, it does make it easy perhaps a bit easier, for people to be able to do that. But yeah, you know, it doesn't make it, you know, a good looking thing for anybody. And I wonder what the you know, Japanese football media is going to be making of this story as well, because, you know, we're seeing it all from the Australian side of things, of this is the run of, you know, pretty bad discipline that he's had. You know, he's now leaving the club in this period of basically turmoil, right? Leaving as the captain. They're in a fight for finals, a hunt for finals. All of a sudden, they're not going to have one of their best players. You know, he's been suspended. He's saying things on social media. It'll be interesting to see how much of that the Japanese media picks up on when, you know, when the move is finalised and announced, because, you know, a lot of the time you're looking at the positives, right? So, look at this new player that's coming into the league. Look at all these great things he's done. I wonder if it's going to be a bit different, where maybe it is a bit unavoidable because how close it's happened to his move. Whereas, you know, it's not like he's been suspended for a while and nothing's really happened and then he makes the move. It's been bang, 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 and all in this sort of first half of the season. It's just gone crazy for him. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that's received over there. But yeah, it's just still such an awful looking move for Germain. And I do really feel for the club. And like you said, Christian, for Mile Stejovski as well, because, you know, you can't predict something like this to happen. You can't predict one of your key players to just blow up and decide to leave and, you know, perhaps, you know, negotiate a contract with an overseas club sort of almost in the dark behind your backs a little bit. It just, yeah, all the makings of this are just...
Where have we seen that before in the A-League this season?
I reckon
that's right. He should be playing Yokohama. That would be a good fit with Patrick Vizcarra, wouldn't it?
Interesting link. So another factor of this that is very interesting is that the Bulls did eventually confirm this information late Monday afternoon. Then about an hour later, we got a separate release providing comment from Bulls CEO Sam Kerslovich, and it says, "We are a genuine pathway club committed to maximising player potential and ensuring outcomes that are fair for all involved. While not everything can be said publicly, our actions demonstrate that we are the club where players earn their place in the A-League and are not blocked if a fair opportunity arises overseas." Now, when you think of the rest of their window, Christian, you can kind of see where those comments overlap. Jed Drew, Ariath, Piol leaving to go develop their career, and the club has received payment for those players, right? But for something like this to come out on the day that they lose Valère Germain, who, from what we understand, has mutually terminated his contract to go play somewhere else. I think the line of, while not everything can always be made or said publicly, stands out like a sore thumb here. I just wonder what else is going on.
Yeah, I mean, because it was one of the reasons, right, that was stated that Germain left. So I'm just thinking, like, what were the other underlying factors that made him want to make this decision? Like, something had to be going on, obviously, behind the scenes, or something deeper to really force this move out, because it's just a strange one. Like, you just don't leave because of refereeing decisions. And like you said at the start, like, it's not like he's been targeted every single game, not that I think, anyway. So, yeah, whether it's a cultural issue or environmental issue, I don't quite think so. Maybe something else. But, yeah, they are quite, I guess, not straightforward comments, because he hasn't really, I guess, addressed the issue in full. And I understand to an extent why he hasn't done so. But at the same time, like, fans want answers, right, as to why exactly he has left. It's not purely based on refereeing decisions. Otherwise, that is just absolutely pathetic. So, yeah, I'd love to find out more. Hopefully there's, I guess, another statement in the next week or so. I'm not too sure if they will, though, but because they don't really have to, they're not obliged to. So, yeah, I just think the fans deserve a bit more than that.
I'd be interested to know how the squad reacts to this. I think will be a telltale sign, perhaps, of what's going on there, because if we see them continue on playing like nothing's really happened, that might be an indication that there was some things going on behind the scenes, and perhaps what a perceived loss isn't actually that great to the club, because they were maybe perhaps prepared for it or expecting it, or God forbid hoping for it, right? But if they do come out of the gates a bit like Victory did after Patrick Isnorbo left, and they look a bit shell shocked and they can't put things together, maybe it is a case of this has come out of the blue and it's a bit of a rash decision, and it's just the last couple of weeks or month or so has just taken its toll on Germain. He's decided to just quit and make a change. I think that's going to be a real indicator, because I don't think we are ever going to get the full story on what's gone on here until such time as Germain retires and decides to write a biography, right? Like, it's not going to happen anytime soon.
Or maybe it can work the other way, right? I mean, because I've said before that he's a bit of a hothead. Maybe he unsettled a few feathers in the dressing room, perhaps. Maybe the squad takes it differently. They think, oh, he's out, that's perfect. Maybe they didn't. Maybe he was a bit of a nuisance. We don't know the full story, so maybe
it's like a mutiny of some sort where the players got together. They're like, this guy's the captain. How is he supposed to lead us when he's the one getting suspended? He's the one making these comments, and it sort of almost forced everybody's hands a little bit. Yeah, we don't know. Obviously, it's all speculation, but if we ever find out, it would be a very interesting story, I'm sure.
So on the footballing side of this, the bigger question is what happens to the team, and you kind of pushed us in this direction now. So they drop out of the top six after this loss to the Wanderers on the weekend. Two of their best players are now gone in Valère Germain and Jed Drew, which, funnily enough, also the two players that combined for the winner in their most recent victory over Melbourne City a few weeks ago now. They've lost those extra auxiliaries that we mentioned, and specifically Christian on the goal-scoring side of it. It appears that Harry Sawyer will now get an extended run of games at A-League level to prove his quality. We've talked plenty about what he did in South Melbourne shirt last year. He did just about everything except put the ball in the back of the net on Sunday afternoon. Obviously, hasn't played a lot of football recently, but I think there's this really interesting comparison that he came straight in off the NPL season, and that off-season is now finished and the NPLs are starting up again, and now Harry Sawyer's coming back to the field. But he obviously offers a very different profile to Germain, right? He's tall. He can finish quickly on the turn like we saw in this game. But, like any player that's been on the bench for a little while, it takes you a little bit of time to get up to speed, which, to be fair, the Bulls have because it's so congested. I know they've dropped out, but an extra draw or a loss isn't going to hurt them so much, but they need to find a good run of form somewhere, and he's probably going to be part of the pivotal equation to do that.
He'll have to be, because they essentially have no one else, right? He's going to have to be the focal point of that front line if they want to squeeze into that finals position. Yeah, he offers a lot of different qualities to Germain. He can be that real target man link up well, and it could prove to be a benefit for MacArthur. Maybe they choose more to play on the counter attack, soaking up some more pressure and just using him as an outlet for those wider plays to exploit and take advantage. So, he hasn't disappointed me. Like, when he's come on, I think he's done all right. It's just the goals that have been missing, right? Everything else, he's done okay, right? With the defensive work, the tracking back, I think that's all been fine. Just if he can find that goal scoring form, that's the missing link. If he can get that right, I think MacArthur, you can put them back up as potential, a potential finals appearance for them. So, he just needs more consistent minutes, because at the minute he just hasn't, coming off the bench here and there, these little cameos just obviously haven't helped him. It's a completely different experience than what he had at South Melbourne, where he was playing every game, playing basically 90 minutes per game. He was getting that consistency under his belt and he had that rhythm, whereas MacArthur, obviously, that just has disappeared. So if he can find that goal-scoring form, I think definitely MacArthur are a chance. But I'm looking at this table. Are they going to move ahead of Sydney? I don't think so. Western United are probably the only team who I feel they have a chance of jumping. The rest of the sides, Melbourne City with their players coming back, I think they're a stronger unit than they were a few weeks ago. And then the rest of the teams, I think, are making finals. They're basically a lock. So, I think it's going to be tight.
Let's check in with where the table has left us after this weekend, because it's getting seriously tasty now. In terms of the premiership race, Auckland have opened up their lead to 5 points, of course, with that win against Western United, whereas Adelaide have failed to keep pace and threatening to fall into that kind of mid-table scramble of teams, of which the Wanderers have also done some catching up from the other end. So their win moving them level with the Bulls and Sydney in 6th through 8th position, all on 25 points, a little bit mad. And now they all have a 4-point gap to the Mariners, who are leading the chasing pack in 9th. But after their flurry of injuries last week, it's hard to see. And I'll throw in Wellington Phoenix's rather drab performance on Friday night as well. It's hard to see those two teams doing anything. Maybe the Jets are a bit of a shouter after their last 2 weeks. We'll get to them shortly. But in terms of the finals positions, who do you think is missing out here? I think, in terms of those 8 teams, Jacob, the Bulls, for me, they've lost too much quality and we've seen them continue to drop. I don't know how they recover for here, but apart from that, it's really open. We've seen the Wanderers be able to turn it on in moments, and maybe their inconsistency will be their undoing. But Sydney FC are just on the edge. They have to still deal with ACL2, depending on how deep they go in that competition. Their forward line haven't been completely fit the whole season. They've had to drop players in and out. Western United have gone on runs. We thought they were doing really positively, but now they haven't won in their last 3. Melbourne City have just broken their 3-game losing streak as, Lecky played his first 90 minutes of the season. There's so many variables here, and it's really hard to tell who's going to get up.
But of the 6 that are in the top 6, it does feel like they have, and this is a silly thing to say because obviously, but they are the best 6 of the 8 teams that are there, right? Like, they're just like, would I put MacArthur or the Wanderers in over Sydney or Western United? At this point, probably not, right? Like, I just, I don't think that you're right there, Lockie. MacArthur lost too much quality. Wanderers way too inconsistent, and usually tipping in the bad side of it more than the good side. Whereas Sydney, at least they can hold on for draws, and they can do a dirty job and get away with a point, sort of thing that the Wanderers have seemed to find pretty tough to come by recently. But they're on a decent run themselves. It's really open. It's really crazy. It just sort of seems like no team has been able to put it together this season except for Auckland, right? Auckland are sort of cruisy up in first place, 5-point gap now, because they've just been like, it was just easy. They're making light work. They're winning against the teams they should be winning against. They're running it close against more difficult opposition, but keeping on the good side of things and making sure they're getting points and things like that. So they really seem to be the only team that's actually set up for success this season. The rest of it is just a complete mishmash of inconsistency, weird football, crazy results, just all sorts, and it makes it very entertaining, right, every week, because you can just never tell who's going to win. You can never tell what the scoreline's going to be. Is it going to be 1-0 win in pouring down rain on Valentine's Day, or is it going to be some crazy 4-4 draw in 35-degree heat or something like that, right? Like it could just be anything at this point in time, and it does make it exciting. And I think that now we're sort of in the back end of the season, these games are going to get even crazier because there is actually more to play for now, right? At the start, you're sort of like trying to figure out where you're at. You've still got the transfer window coming up, so maybe you're still looking for a couple of players, but this is it now. You're in the back end of the season. Transfer window is closed. You've either done your business or you've not done anything, and you're going to stick with what you've got. It's going to be you 8 teams playing for 6 spots, and then potentially some of those lower ranked teams. You mentioned the Jets. Maybe if they can keep up this run, we saw Western do it, right, and jump right up from the bottom half of the table into the 6. And they were 3rd heading into this week. So, maybe it's possible, that then there's 9 teams playing for 6 spots come the last few rounds of the season. Wouldn't that be crazy? But no, it's incredibly tight right now. And it's the fact that it's tight on everything. It's tight on points. It's tight on goal difference. It's not like there's teams that are just massively outscoring their opposition and they've got 20 goals over the next team but tied for points. It's like, no, they're still relatively close even when you're looking at goal difference. So it's just been a topsy-turvy season, and it's been very enjoyable though, and hopefully it continues like this.
Christian said Western United. Who do you think is the most likely team of that 6 to drop out, if anyone?
Sydney maybe, actually. I like Western and what they've got going on, and I think that they have a spark that perhaps Sydney haven't quite had in the league this season. Sydney have had it in Asia perfectly fine, where they've had that sort of dynamism and they've looked really fluid and just impressive in attack, and they have done in the league, but not to the extent they have done in Asia, I don't think. And their issues in transition have been exposed repeatedly, almost sort of every week. It seems like they're massively under threat for it, whereas Western actually seem defensively set up pretty well. They're making mistakes, and they're still a leaky team, but with what they've got, the players they've got, they're actually doing a fairly decent job, and they're a well-structured side. So I just think of those teams, those 6, I think Sydney are the most likely to drop out, and especially with the sorts of teams that are around them, where I think that MacArthur, if they can find some of this mythical form, they might actually be a more solid team than Sydney are, for instance. But it's I think that the top 6 at this point in time looks pretty solid compared to the contenders, but only time will tell.
I'm actually going to go Melbourne City. I think they won 1-0 against Perth on the weekend. A really nice goal to Lawrence Wong, who we'll talk about a little bit more later. But that papered over the cracks a little bit for me. That's a tight 1-0 win coming off 3 consecutive losses. And
even with some of their key players coming back?
Yeah, but that's the thing though, right? If they come back, Lecky's playing 90 minutes, Tilio and Caputo both started. They've probably got Andreas Kuhn and Jonathan Cohen somewhere in the next month to come back. Maybe if they build up if they qualify for finals, they look pretty good in finals, but you got to get there. And right. Yes, you can afford to lose a game or two because it is so tight. But I just think they haven't clicked yet. They haven't shown a game with these new players. I say new. They're experienced players that are just actually playing Christian to actually prove to me that they can put in consistent performances. And all it's going to take, if they hadn't, if Lawrence Wong hadn't scored that goal, they're in 25 points with 6 goal difference. They're in 7th, and the Bulls are in the 6th. That's the margins that we're dealing with.
Yeah, I'm just laughing because how quickly a season can turn. And like a few weeks ago, you were saying, Lockie, that you had City basically as a lock for finals. And when I was arguing that I still need to see a bit more from City. And I knew this time would come where City would start. I've got to get one prediction right. I'm just putting it out there. And yeah, like I said, I just need to see a bit more from them because of the amount of injuries. And yes, they've got players coming back, but they look a bit underwhelming, don't they? I just think I just think they'll scrape through. Western United, for as impressive as they have been, and Jacob, you mentioned they've been well structured, surprisingly, because before the season we were like maybe bottom two, but they've completely proven us wrong. Credit to them, but I just think the teams around them, like Sydney always find a way, don't they? I mean, you can talk about lack of transition. They just they just know how to win games when it really counts. So, and I think City actually one of those teams as well, to an extent, with Vidmar as coach. I just think he'll have his ways to get the best out of his side. Although, yes, it's not been pretty the past few weeks, the 1-0 win against Perth. It's not pretty viewing. But at the same time, I just think he does have enough to really get the best out of this team. And yeah, like I said, as much as West United have really performed well, exciting to watch, entertaining. Got to remember too, they're a very young team, and that's one of the worries we did have coming to the season. Will the wheels fall off? It hasn't quite yet. That doesn't mean it can't. Towards the back end of the season, when the pressure really starts to pile, and they're jammed in with those 2, 3, 4 teams surrounding them for 5th, 6th position. So yeah, it's going to be really fascinating.
All right, let's go to one of what would absolutely be a red-on smoky. Only 2 teams that have won their last 2 consecutive games. One is Auckland FC. The other, Jacob, is the Newcastle Jets. Look, I'm not a believer. I think they've, picked their moments against Melbourne and Adelaide in the last 2 games, and it is congratulations to them for winning, 2 games against top 3 opposition. The combination of Lockie Rose and Kota Mizunuma was great. Again, they've combined for another goal again. This is probably some of the best football the Jets have played, but they have also ridden their luck at moments. And I think that is just part of the flow of the season, that you have good moments and you have bad moments. I don't see them continuing a big run of form to crack for finals, but it's an interesting conversation to have right now after they've won 2 of these games.
I think it's just a case of what comes around goes around. For large swathes of the season so far, the Jets have just not had things go their way. The number of times I've seen them hit the crossbar, it feels like it happens, basically every second game that they play. The ball isn't going over the line. It's just little things happen that don't quite seem to go their way. It's something that Robbie Stanton has said in press conferences a couple of times, that it's just one of those things where it just doesn't work out. And now it has done in it, for a couple of games, and they've got those results. So I think it's sort of showing, if you read between the lines, right, they're not a team that's going to beat Adelaide and Victory every single week, but they're not a team that's going to lose every single game either. They're somewhere in between that. It's just the fact that it has been so wildly one way or the other for them, that either things have gone completely not their way or completely all their way. They've not had that in between. A bit like some of the teams in the top 6, but, for as inconsistent as we were saying they've been, the Jets have been even more inconsistent. So it's, I think it's almost sort of just dues for them, because they have deserved to get some results this season that they haven't quite managed to get. They've not held on for draws. They've turned draws into losses, turned wins into draws, been unable to press home advantages in games where they've had the lead or where they have a man advantage and things like that. It's just those little things. They didn't work in the moment, but now it's almost like karma. It comes back. They get a chance to redo things, and they get a couple of wins on the bounce. So, it'll be good for squad morale, and I think it'll be, a real testament to, like I said, what the actual squad is capable of doing. Because if they can push on from this and continue their form on, like Western United did earlier this season, then, they are perhaps a better team than their record shows. But I think that this is, like you said, Lockie, just a case of football being football, and eventually things are going to sort of average themselves out a little bit over the course of the season, and that's just what's happening with the Jets right now.
Christian, are you a believer?
Well, you mentioned that they're a smoky. I said that Newcastle would beat Adelaide, so I'm not too sure why.
To qualify for the 6.
No, they're way too far behind. What are they? 19 points, 6 behind.
18, so
18
7
points.
points.
18, sorry, I was looking at Wellington, 7 points. No, wait, they're too far behind, and I just don't see them stringing these kind of results together from now until the rest of the season. Like, they've had good moments. I think back to last week, I watched that whole game of the Victory, and that first half Victory dominated. They were unlucky not to score, and then the second half rode their luck a bit. with the bit of the extended break for half an hour or so, and they really got on top and capitalised. And there's a bit of the same against Adelaide as well. So I like what they're doing. Is it enough to make that next step, and qualify for finals? I don't think so. I just don't think they've got the depth and perhaps the quality compared to some of the other teams at the top. And I think that's pretty much fair to say, right? Because we predict them to finish in the bottom four. Didn't have it much higher, I would have thought. So, yeah, I mean, if Lockie Rose and other of these players start producing and consistently and really helping drive this momentum, then maybe it's like half a chance, but I just don't see it.
Fair enough. Jacob, the team they beat on the weekend, Adelaide United, they had a good win the week before, and we talked about that scenario of Auckland having the bye, so it was a really good catch-up morale opportunity, and they took that. And then in this game, they didn't take their opportunities. They had a number of chances, particularly late on in the game, to get themselves back into it that they didn't take. And now they do find themselves not only letting Auckland escape a little bit, but with the likes of Victory and City winning underneath them, they're almost at that point. Yes, they have a game in hand on Victory, but almost at that point where they're falling into that kind of mid-table pack as well.
Yeah. It's a side that is incredibly volatile, this Adelaide team, because of the way that it's set up. Colviet has Adelaide set up to win games by just scoring a lot of goals, right? And that's always been like a hallmark of his coaching style, right? He was a striker himself. He loved to score goals. No surprise that the teams that he coaches sort of adopt a similar play style. They look to be aggressive. They look to score a bunch of goals and that sort of thing. But what happens then is when you're not putting the ball in the back of the net, it doesn't matter how good the chances are, you're not going to win a game because you're going to concede a goal. So it becomes this really difficult situation for a team where, Adelaide were absolutely dominant in that first half and probably should have scored 3 or 4 goals just based on the chances that they produced alone, but could not put the ball in the back of the net. And that is the problem with this sort of a side, is that unlike an Auckland, where if, perhaps things aren't going their way in the final third, they know they can hold on defensively and at least secure a draw. Adelaide, it doesn't seem like that is really ever a possibility. It's all or nothing. They either score a bunch of goals and win by, 2 goals, 1 goal, but it's like a 4-3, or they can't score and, the opposition are able to get one over them. It's been, it has felt like it's been coming, this sort of run of form, because, they started the season off undefeated. They went undefeated longer than Auckland did. Everyone's going, when's it all going to collapse? And it just felt like it was going to take one significant loss to sort of start to unravel things. And, I think with that loss against Sydney a couple of weeks ago, yes, okay, they then rebounded with the win, but it wasn't particularly comprehensive. It was very streaky. And then another loss off of what was a really poor second half performance. It's just, it feels like maybe things are starting to unravel for Adelaide. Their saving grace perhaps is the fact that they have sort of built a bit of a buffer between themselves and sort of the rest of the 6 there, the 4 teams below them. Make it, 6 teams below them technically, with MacArthur and Wanderers added in as well. So, there's a bit of a buffer there, but is it going to be enough? I just don't know. And you look at the fact that they didn't address the problems in the transfer window, right? They didn't sign any defenders, which is something that has been a need for a long, long time at this club, and it's just still not happened. The one player they had on trial, he went off to Europe, so that didn't even get over the line. And it's also just, it feels like it might even be a case of more than just the players, because Bart Vriends, who I thought when he came back from his pre-season injury and started to get those starting minutes with the side, I thought he offered a significant improvement. I thought he looked very, very good. But in the last few matches, coinciding with the poor form, he's looked out of touch. He's been pretty poor on the ball and indecisive. He's been really sort of just pressed out of the game a lot of the time. He doesn't look great against the press compared to what Kikianis has done for Adelaide, for instance. And even off the ball defensively, that second goal, I'm putting squarely on Bart Vriends for that one, because he completely misjudged the way that the Jets wanted to attack that, and it's something that as your veteran defender you can really ill afford. And so I'm sort of in two minds about it. Is it a case of he's just had a poor run of form, so Adelaide are suffering because they're relying on him so much? Perhaps. Is it deeper rooted because Adelaide have not been good defensively for a long, long time now? And that's despite a number of different combinations at the back. Is it perhaps an issue with coaching and, the systems and the structures that are in place? There was another goal in this one, the first goal for the Jets, where there was just seemingly no marking whatsoever in the box, which has been another persistent problem. Like, it does seem deeper rooted than just players. So, I said before they didn't address the problem in the transfer window. Maybe they simply couldn't have, because it's just a case of it doesn't matter who you bring in when the team isn't set up to actually have them be able to play well. They're not going to play well. You're not going to get the results. But, there's still a feeling amongst the fan base here in Adelaide that this team is going to achieve something this season. A lot of people just going, yeah, okay, we're going to lose games. Every now and again, it's going to happen. It's about how we bounce back. And obviously, last week, bounced back from the loss against Sydney. There's a chance to do so again here, but it's against Western United. Like, Western are also looking to bounce back. They're another very, very good team that you're coming up against. The Jets should beat. If you want to be serious about winning something, you've got to beat the Jets at home. Yeah. So it's just, it seems like it's a really topsy-turvy season for Adelaide. A bit similar to last season, right? It had a very good start to the season last year, the Reds, but then fell off quite quickly. This season, it seems like it's dragged out a little bit longer. So whether it's false hope or whether there is, legitimate title contender in this side, I'm still not 100% certain, because I've just not seen it for a long enough period of time to say definitively that, yes, this team is going to go on and do things this season.
Well, interestingly, with Adelaide, there's only one game this season that they've won by more than a single goal. Yeah. So the margins have been fine all over the place. I wonder, you probably don't have the stats at the top of your head, but since Mark Milligan's exit, he was responsible for a lot of defensive duties, right, in terms of a coaching perspective. So that's a question for you for next week. I just wonder what his leaving has had an impact on the club. But the other kind of top four clash, Christian, at least at the start of the weekend, was between Auckland and Western United. And it feels a lot like Western United have also dropped an opportunity, the same as Adelaide. This is kind of a big 6-pointer. And I'm not saying that they had massive premiership hopes, but if they did, this is a game that, for me, they had to win. And it's funny, it almost feels like we're back towards the start of the season where talking about Auckland is kind of boring now because they just keep winning all the time. But for Western, they're coming off a run of 2 draws and have now lost this game. Their form has come down a little bit. And this was really their chance to not just establish themselves in this pack, but to beat Auckland in this scenario would have brought the whole pack together and really opened up the race.
Again, it's where experience comes into it, right? I mean, Western were, I thought, well in that first half. They had a couple of chances and Auckland did 1 or 2 as well. But at the end of that first half, that's when you've got to be disciplined. You've got to close up shop. I know the first goal was a bit of a freak from Mate, right? I mean, outside the box was 30 yards, just a freak goal. It was a great strike.
That was like the against the wind side as well, right?
Yeah, which made it even more impressive. And the second goal, to be caught out like that in transition when you've already been a goal down and then 30 seconds to go until the break, you've just got to know when to bring numbers back, when to defend, be cautious, and they weren't. Auckland just completely picked them apart for fun, and you're going 2-0 down at halftime to Auckland. Good luck with that heading into the second half and trying to get something from that game. So I think Auckland handled the second half really well. It showed their maturity, their composure, what they've shown basically throughout most of this season. And that's why, for the most part, essentially they've been top of the table, and they deserve it. So I think this is the game that, you're right. If Western had any chance at all of making first, and they had to at least get a point. With that 5-point gap now, how many games to go? Is it
9 or 10, depending on who you are?
9 or 10. I'm not saying it's impossible, but this is a real head-to-head that they had to win, not only because of the table gap, but psychologically. Like, they've already beaten Auckland once away from home. To get another win over them, that would have been a real confidence boost, and especially off the back of 2 draws. I think Aloisi would have looked at it to say, yes, it's a very young and immature side, but if we could beat Auckland twice in one season, then the sky's the limit. How much potential do we actually have at this club? So, it's had disappointing that they couldn't get a point because, we were saying in the predictions, I think you, Lockie, said that Western, and you, Jacob, as well, that they were, it wouldn't be a complete shock if they got something from this game. But, I don't think their finals, the top 6 is in jeopardy because of this loss. And they've dropped, obviously, a few points recently as well. But, yeah, they might be playing with fire towards the end of the season. Like I said, inexperienced heads, the legs might drop off. Who are you going to turn to on the bench? So, yeah, it could be very tricky. I think they're just going to need to pick up a couple more wins, and then we can definitively say that Western are going to be a finals lock.
Now, we don't usually do this on a Tuesday, but just in the context of talking about the ladder like we are, these fixtures coming up are too important not to speak about. Adelaide and Western United are coming up against each other, fresh off those disappointing losses. So that's 2v5 on the table as it stands. Adelaide then play Auckland the following week, which just makes it a massive run for them. And then the Melbourne Derby as well, Jacob. It's not only, the Derby scenario, bragging rights on the line, final game of the year, but there's 1 point between them. They're in third and fourth on the table. And again, it's just this context of the season that we're in. It's almost like the winner earns the right to be able to jump up and then try and chase down Adelaide and try and maybe somehow chase down Auckland as well. That's just the margins we're down with. We talked about City a little bit in terms of their transitional players, Lawrence Wong scoring that brilliant goal. Victory on the weekend against Wellington, interestingly, showed exactly what they've been missing the last month or so, which was just a little bit of clinical finishing at the perfect moment. I think it's a really important goal for Nikos Fergos. He hasn't scored a bunch this season, but has looked pretty good. And a fair ball from Santos as well to pin him out there. So two teams that have coming in off of wins as opposed to Adelaide and Western in what is setting up to be a massive, massive game on Saturday night.
It's going to be huge. This is the biggest Melbourne derby in a little while, it feels like, just because of the situation that both teams find themselves in, where it is like you said, for City especially, a really big chance to catch back up to that top two, right? Because they were up there for a little while and sort of fell off with those 3 losses in a row. But this is an opportunity now, especially with Adelaide dropping points, to get right back into the thick of it. Victory, obviously, having played a game extra, a game more than Auckland, Adelaide and City. So, they still will have, a chance to be chased down, I suppose. But, it's also a case of, and I feel like I say it every week now, but points on the board versus games in hand. And, if Victory can get it, perhaps it'll be a little bit demoralising for some of the other teams looking up at them going, that's a pretty big lead to have to try and catch down, even with a game to play on them. So it's going to be a huge game. In terms of the players, you mentioned there, Lawrence Wong. I just want to say I brought him up in the last week's episode as one to watch out for. So good to see that pay off massively. He's a very talented player, and Vidmar was talking about him at the end of the Adelaide United game a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying, this is like exactly what we expect from him when we see him out on the pitch. Like, what we didn't see was the finish, right? It's like he came close, but he didn't quite get it. He's like, so keep an eye out for that, because when he puts it in the back of the net, that'll be when teams should start being worried about him. And he's put it in the back of the net now. So, he should have that confidence moving forward so that he can do it. And hopefully he can continue to produce for City. Because one of the things that's led to their recent downturn in form is the fact they've not been able to get the ball in the back of the net. So if they can, find a player who can do that consistently, that's going to be huge. And then you mentioned Nikos Vergos. And I actually want to look at the other side of this goal for a second, just very quickly, because the Phoenix have not had a great season, no. But they were set up so perfectly to defend this goal. It's not even funny. They were in a 4-2 rest defence. Like, they had more than half their team behind the ball ready to defend this, and they still conceded the chance and conceded the goal. And I think that is an indictment on the team and the season that they've had this far, because if you are set up to defend exactly these sorts of moments in transition and you cannot do it, I mean, I feel for Chiefy, because what more can you do, right? You've set the team up perfectly and they fail to execute. There's not a lot more that you can do. But it was a very well taken goal. Another headed goal for Vergos, which is something that we've seen. He obviously has over Fornaroli. So, again, we're in this conversation for Victory of who's going to play striker. Vergos has scored another goal again, but Fornaroli is this player and he does it. And it's like, it feels like it's going to be a season-long argument over who starts there. But no, it's going to be a massive game in the derby this weekend. And hopefully everything goes smoothly, everybody's well behaved, there's no dramas off the pitch, and that on the pitch we have a cracking game of football, because with the way that both teams are coming into this, like you said, Lockie, off of wins, I'm expecting it to be a good game.
Absolutely. Christian, one piece of transfer news, shall we call it, this week. Perth Glory have ended what they're saying is a 3-month chase, actually, for former Tottenham Hotspur product Luke Amos. The 27-year-old came through Tottenham's academy, has a Premier League cap to his name. Since leaving in 2020, he's gone to QPR in the Championship, and most recently Hibernian in Scotland, where he's made 8 appearances over 1.5 seasons. Interestingly, comes recommended highly from Nick Montgomery, who is the former manager of Hibernian, who must have given him a few of those appearances. But I think what's interesting for me about this move, Christian, is it's the kind of visa archetype that we saw a lot of last season that really dominated the league, that kind of 25 to 29 youth products from a really high quality academy overseas. Probably hasn't done as well since hitting seniors football, and then looking to rejuvenate their career. And I think this quote from Amos was very key as well. He said, "There were 4 Aussies at my last club at Hibernian, plus Adam Lafondra, and they all spoke really highly of the A-League. I've seen what the A-League can do for players' careers, and as soon as the opportunity to come up to the A-League came about, it was something that I was very keen to do." So he's got a deal to the end of the year, and the club has a 1-year option for him. So not only is it an interesting signing for Perth to try and explore their possibilities of, getting a little bit of form to end the season on a high, but also, again, in the A-League, we're seeing a player come over trying to restart their career, and it's, turning out to be a pretty good location to do just that.
And I think, above all, it's a smart deal, right? I mean, in years past, you'd see clubs signing 35-year-olds on 2-3-year contracts. At least this, it's like a short-term deal, and then you've got the option to add an extra year if you're impressed with the player, if he's doing well. So I think, looking in that demographic, that 25 to 30 range, in terms of years, I think that's definitely the way forward for A-League clubs that they should be looking down towards. And on top of obviously producing the youth and focusing on the youth academies, rather than heavily investing on just washed up players, essentially. I'm just going to be as nice
proven
as
quality,
about
Christian. Come on, be nice to him.
Okay, proven quality that are no longer quality, if that makes sense. So I think trending in this path is definitely positive for the league. It's great for the clubs because, even like for a 27-year-old in this instance, I mean, in a year or two time, if he does produce a lot of good results, like he can earn, a move to Asia if he wants to, and clubs can earn a bit of money out of that, right? Whereas if you're signing a 35, 36-year-old where he doesn't really have much to give, he might leave after a year anyway. I think, like, what benefit does that really add to your club? Like, it's a bit of a gamble. Whereas, yes, this is a gamble as well in a sense. You don't really know what you're going to get from him, right? In terms of, like, obviously they've done their scouting work and all of this, but, new country, new culture, different league, we know, so it can be different in that sense. But if he does prove to play well, then it can have a lot of benefits for the club at his age. So definitely think it's the path to lean on for all clubs in the league.
Yeah, better odds for sure. Massive week coming up in Asia, firstly for Sydney FC. 2-2, of course, heading into the second leg of their Asian Champions League 2 round of 16 clash against Bangkok United. Both teams with a full week off, Jacob, with buys in their respective domestic leagues. Hopefully Douglas Costa is fit to start in this one. He's kind of been just pushed back gently into the Sydney starting 11 over recent weeks. Hopefully this is the game where that tips over and we can see him from the off, because it's a very, very big game for Sydney.
It's a massive game, and the fact that it's 2-2, okay, it's disappointing not to get the result at home, right, number one, but it's essentially coming into a one-leg fixture now at this point, is what it is, right? Away goals don't mean anything. It's just, you just start from scratch, and I think that Costa, like you said, Lockie, could be a real difference maker in this one, but part of me also worries that Sydney are thinking that as well, and they might rush him into it. He's not properly prepared and fit for it, and he doesn't have the impact that we'd like to see in Sydney end up losing the match, right? It's got to be such a headache for Tale to try and figure out what to do here, because this is such an important fixture. I think the way that the Champions League elite is the Champions League 2 is panning out for them, there's a genuine shot at perhaps going on to the final here, and they've just got to get over this first hurdle, and it's going to be tough. It's Bangkok, so it's not it's not the massivest trip of all time. It's not like some of the stuff the Mariners had to do last year, right? Going up to like Kyrgyzstan and stuff like that. But it's still an away trip in Asia. It's going to be a hostile atmosphere, and Bangkok are a very good team, as we saw when they came down to Sydney. So I really hope that Sydney can get the job done, because it would be great to see another Australian team going deep in Asian competition. As we said on the last podcast as well, it's for the coefficient, right? So that's always a benefit too. But I think that there's like I said, a genuine opportunity for Sydney to do something in this tournament. They've just got to make sure they don't mess it up now in this final leg. And it's a clean slate. They're not down. They're not chasing the game or anything like that. They can play the way that they want to play and hopefully get the result. But it's going to be a massive game, and I'm sure a really good watch as well.
So that game kicks off at 11 p.m. Australian Daylight Time on Wednesday evening. You reckon, Christian, is it time that we bring back the live streams? I don't know. We haven't done one in a little while. What does 11 p.m. kickoff sound like to you?
It depends if the fans want it. If the people want it, then we'll give it to them. Put in a poll, get a vote going, and if we get a favourable response, then we'll start a live stream for them.
All right, watch this space. I
think Christian's just... said he's going to host it there, basically, right? It's...
Okay, everyone vote no.
Yeah. If you could do all the tech for me, that'd be great.
Yeah.
The other game is, of course, the Mariners, their final outing in the Champions League Elite against Kawasaki Frontale. Interestingly, we know Japanese teams are a powerhouse of Asian football. 1, 2, 3. Bang at the moment in the East. So that's a formidable opponent, Christian. Have we got any semblance of hope to say that Jacob's shaking his head feverishly?
Why are you even asking this question?
The Mariners might get at least one win. One win would be great.
Well, okay, so for the top 8, Kawasaki, obviously, they've qualified. So I guess in terms of ranking, it does matter in terms of where Kawasaki end up. Is that right? In terms of the seeding. So yeah, at least they've got something to play for. I was going to say they might rest a few players, but if that's really going to be a factor, then you just can't see it. It's like for the
even if Kawasaki rested half their squad, I still don't think the Mariners can get the job done.
I know they've been pretty abysmal in the campaign. Let's be honest. I mean, we knew it was going to be difficult, but. Yeah, to dish up some of the performances they have. I know they had a difficult off-season with some of the player turnover and whatnot, but yeah, this is one of the worries you had, Lockie, wasn't it, with the Mariners entering this competition? Yeah, it's like if it's a Sydney or a Victoria or Wanderers, you've said this countless times, right? If it's a bigger club, they've got the resources, they've got the depth, you can trust them a bit more, right? Whereas the Mariners, it seems like some of these smaller clubs, it's like you can't really trust them, right? Because yes, they won obviously the treble last season with the AFC Cup, and what they did there was phenomenal, but you've got to have the right ingredients and surroundings. They had everything lined up right. This season has just been completely the opposite, which has been a real shame. And for the coefficient as well, for you, Lockie, it's been very dreadful. So hopefully they can pull one out of the bag, but I doubt it. I severely doubt it.
Well, if you don't find that game too enticing to watch, there is an interesting one in the fixture. Shanghai Port, Kevin Muscat's side, going up against his old team, Yokohama F. Marinos as well. And Shanghai will likely need to win that game to qualify for the final stages. So a nice little Aussie link there. There are plenty of, outright just Aussies over playing in the Under-20 Asian Cup. Under-20 Asian Cup at the moment. The Young Socceroos got up 3-1 against Qatar last Saturday night in their second game of the group. Come from behind as well. There's a couple of really nice goals in here. Badalato, Bojnak, and an absolute rocket from Daniel Benny as well to seal the game. They are now tied with China on 6 points in the group, but ahead on goal difference. So they are through to the quarterfinals, but all they need is a draw against China in that final match on Tuesday night to lock up top spot. And of course, as we've said before, get top spot, get yourself a favourable draw in the quarterfinal, for which is essentially a qualification match to the World Cup, Jacob. So they're through. They're going to have 90 minutes to try and qualify for the world stage, which is pretty cool. But on the basis of what we've seen so far, the young Socceroos really should be aiming for more than that and pushing towards this Asian Cup title.
easily one of the best sides in the competition. Just based on the performances we've seen so far, right? They look comprehensive as a unit. They play well together. They put teams to the sword. They're able to come from behind like they did here against Qatar. It just seems like a very well-rounded squad that they've got and a very good group of players. And, you know, when there's some fantastic individuals in the team, but they're also playing good football, that helps too. And, you know, yeah, they can essentially cruise in this game against China. Like, you know, they don't want to switch off completely and then end up losing, and then somehow, you know, results don't go their way, they fall out and, you know, don't move on to the
Nothing
next
comes
stage.
easy in Australian football.
Yeah, that's true. But, you know, you back this squad to be honest, I think they probably beat China in this game. It feels like they're on a hot streak, yes, but it just feels like they're almost unstoppable. I don't know, maybe it's this quality of youth, but they just seem like a team that is going to keep fighting and keep pushing and keep playing their best football for as long as they can. And I think that's a great sign for them. And like you said, Lockie, the chance then to push on for the qualification for the World Cup as well, that's got to be a tantalising little carrot to dangle in front of them too, being like, here's your chance to go to the World Cup, boys. Yeah, it's an awesome team. And like you said, I think that they should have aspirations of going on and winning this tournament, because there's no reason that they can't, with the way that they do play, with the teams that they'll be coming up against. Look, Asia is not a bad region by any means, but I think in terms of the quality that we've seen so far, it's clear that these Australian players are almost sort of a step above most of the other sides in the competition. And they really need to capitalise on that, because if they're not, then, you know, it's perhaps a reflection of the entire national setup, right? That they're just unable to win these sorts of tournaments. But if the young Socceroos can do it, maybe it'll be a good sign for the future that there's a confidence and there's a belief that they can go on and actually win things and like I said earlier, put teams to the sword and get these results. And, you know, just for the benefit of everybody at home as well, being able to watch this team compete and keep competing and keep playing is going to be awesome as well. So yeah, fingers crossed that they get the job done against China. Like Christian said, nothing comes easily in Australian football. So you know, as much as it seems like it's a foregone conclusion at this point, it could be getting to the 90 and everybody's a little bit panicked, but yeah, hopefully they get that job done and then they can push on in the knockout stages and really stamp their authority and make it all the way to the final.
Absolutely. Yeah, it seems like a strong age group for Australians. I'd love to see what they could do at a World Cup, I believe in Chile a little bit later in the year, which would be very cool. But that will do for this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. Thank you as always for tuning in. Christian Montegan, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Cheers, Jacob.
Thank you for having me, Lockie.
We'll be back on Friday, your dose of Asian football. It's good to be back. Thank you again for listening. We'll see you then. Goodbye.